I've known people, very stable people, extremely elegant, polished, educated, well-positioned, well-supported people who literally ended up in psych wards because of the pressure that was brought to bear on them by the accusatory mob. And so those of you who think this is a cakewalk, you just bloody well wait till your neighbors show up on your doorstep with pitchforks and torches, and you just see what that's like for yourself. So you better watch yourself very carefully if you think that the people who are complaining about being mobbed are just complaining because they can't take it.
Yeah. I've been covering Jordan Peterson and the board of psychologists that are trying to strip him of his license in Canada. And I want to bring it to you in his own words, what he has to say. He did an hour and a half with his daughter, and I'm bringing you the highlights here. I'm going to be issuing some comments within. Here we go.
I found that kind of accusation of serious personal misconduct unbelievably stressful in 2016. It certainly contributed to me becoming ill.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really want to revisit it, and so I started going through all that documentation last week so that I could lay out everything that's been levied at me. And, I went through all that stuff from 2017, even talking about it now, it makes me shake to some degree. Afterwards, I could hardly stand up. I just about fainted 3 or 4 times and, had a real hard time keeping myself composed. It's very off-putting to, let's say, to have attempted to conduct myself extremely carefully in my professional occupations as a professor and as a clinical psychologist for decades, to step very carefully. Of course, I never had any behavioral accusations levied against me at Harvard or the University of Toronto or as a clinical psychologist in the 30 years I was a professor and 20 years of private practice.
So what exactly are they accusing Jordan Peterson of doing? What malfeasance, what evil acts has he, in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of the psychological board, undertaken? Let's find out.
Not a single person who submitted a complaint in this latest round is a client of mine, although half of them falsely claimed to be.
So immediately we can expect that this is a political hit job, considering the fact that nobody had direct involvement with Jordan Peterson as a client. That's a little bit suspect. Let's get into more particulars.
I've gone through all these complaints, and so here's some of them. I retweeted Pierre Poilievre, who's Canada's leader of the opposition, when he was criticizing the mask lockdowns. I just retweeted him, and I said essentially that I agreed with him.
That's a complaint? They actually listed that as a complaint?
That's one of the complaints.
That's insane.
Yeah. They listed the fact that I criticized Justin Trudeau on multiple occasions. There's a complaint that at one point the police in Ottawa were threatening to act with Children's Aid to take the children away from the truckers in Ottawa and apprehend them on the grounds that their parents who were involved in the protest were endangering them. And I tweeted and said, I'm not so sure that we should get the police involved in taking away the children of protesters, and we should think about this. And apparently that makes me an untrustworthy advocate for children who face childhood sexual abuse.
Oh my gosh.
You're a mandatory reporter as a psychologist, eh? And so if it comes to your attention that someone has been abused, you're mandated to report it. And so apparently I'm now untrustworthy in that regard because I didn't want the police to conspire with idiot social workers in Ottawa to apprehend the children of protesters. And so that's another example of my reprehensible behavior. I'm being called out for the fact that I objected to Ellen Page's surgical mutilation at the hands of her physicians and her consequent advertisement of her new torso on social media. And I'm also required to submit to this media retraining education because I objected to the Sports Illustrated cover of that relatively overweight young model. And there's other complaints, but that's the bulk of them. And so at least half, oh yes, I criticized, I tweeted out to Jacinda Arden that I was coming to New Zealand with my army of alt-right wing trolls, which was clearly a joke. And that's also a complaint, because I guess that sort of joke isn't funny when you're dealing with, woke progressives like Jacinda Arden and Justin Trudeau. And so, oh yes, I counseled people to commit suicide. That's another one. So
wait. You should describe. Oh yeah, describe that.
Yeah. Well, somebody had tweeted out their idea that the planet had too many people on it. And this is not a statement I am very fond of, because every time I hear someone say that, I think, okay, who exactly are these excess people that you're referring to? And who gets to decide that? And how do you know that when they decide that something terrible won't happen, given that these are excess people? And isn't it okay if I question the humanitarian intent of your motives for making such a reprehensible comment? So I tweeted to someone who made an argument like that. I tweeted and said, feel free to leave at any time. And which is obviously an ironic joke, but some bloody social worker in the United States decided that that was an incitation to suicide.
So again, it's completely political. Anybody that stands against Jordan and the leftist orthodoxy can complain about him to the heart's content and get him into major hot water, as he explained initially how he is personally affected by the accusations. The idea that somebody can state that the world is overpopulated and that they believe that we have excess humanity on the planet, and Jordan says, step off anytime you desire, that is earning of his license being stripped when he's not even dealing directly with a client, to a horrible statement made by somebody that obviously is not a fan of humanity and just being taken to task for such. It's political hit job once again. He dared to retweet Pierre Poilievre. Oh my goodness, you stand against the liberal orthodoxy. How dare you? And this is what we are going to find more and more unless we all collectively stand up against their incursion into our affairs and our rights and our ability to make our own decisions. Otherwise, they will continue to gain the ground that we cede. Let's get back to Jordan.
Let's review this. Not a single one of them was levied by a client of mine, present or former. Not a single one of them was levied by anyone I had actually said anything directly to, private or public. There's no evidence whatsoever that I've produced anything regarding harm, because no one has stepped forward to claim harm who was directly harmed. So it's third-party indirect supposition of so-called harm to someone they don't know. And that's the level of evidence that the College of Psychologists is willing to accept as critical.
This is why you don't give ideologues and idiots the reins of power, because, of course, when they wield the ring of Sauron, they will do with the power what gets them off egoically. And Jordan having to answer for something that doesn't affect his clients, that doesn't negatively affect his profession. It's akin to me being a fan of Argentina in power, and somebody says that France is so much better and down with Messi and make some joke about it. And I get to wring their proverbial neck. This is a political hit job, as I stated earlier. It is absolutely a disgrace that somebody's personal views, political, are being wielded against him in basically what is a court of law to take from him something that he has earned over years of practice and study.
There's some evidence that I've done some good in the world. about 7 million people bought my first public book, and I have 15 million subscribers on the 3 main platforms we operate on social media. And lots of people seem to come to my lectures when I am out publicly speaking, saying that I've really helped them in their lives. And that's thousands or hundreds of thousands or possibly even millions of people. And so I think I can stack up a pretty good, plus all the students that I taught at Harvard and the University of Toronto and all my clinical clients, who by and large were pretty damn happy to be working with me and vice versa. It's like, how do you calculate the harm to benefit ratio?
Do you not think of all the stories of families being reunited, of people deciding to make their life better little by little, one day at a time, just a minor improvement every day? Everything that Jordan Peterson preaches from his pulpit, where he inspires what I hope are millions upon millions of people, that is a net benefit for the profession. And yet they are claiming that he denigrated it, that he is the cause because of his political beliefs for the profession's potential downfall, and that no psychologist would want to be associated with somebody that's inspired so many millions of people to a better life. I just call BS on it, flat out. It is once again, political hit job, and we all know it.
Now, when they responded to me, they said that I've, brought disgrace to the profession and caused undue harm to people. And I responded, I'll make this public too, with about 40 questions about their methods. So here's one. Said, well, before I submit myself to this media training re-education, because I'm bound by the ethical standards of my profession, I'm not willing to go get educated unless there's evidence that the contents of the educational program are directly related to the practice of my profession, and that there's evidence that undertaking such re-education actually makes me a more competent therapist. Do you have any independent documentation that these experts that you have hired and foisted upon me have anything approximating genuine expertise? And do you have any evidence whatsoever that such training programs are effective? And of course, they said, we don't have to answer questions like that.
And this is why you have to resist the woke cancer, because the more people that they co-opt into their vision, even those who go unwillingly, even those who just want to get along, who don't really care, who just want an easy life and to go back to their family, they help advance this woke, narcissistic, as Jordan said, communist ideology that wants total control over us. And once they seep into the institution, they make everybody's life hell, which is why we must all speak up today, now, against it, against anybody who possesses this, and just make fun of them, because these people are clowns, they're insecure, they're jokes, and they deserve scorn. That's the truth. And in terms of the East German Stasi that he mentioned, I lived in Eastern Europe for a period of time, and I've been to a lot of the former Eastern European countries. And I have a theory called the hangover of communism, which basically is that a caring parent raised in a system where, if, as he stated, 1 in 3 was a secret informant, would be sent off to the gulags for saying something wrong, that they had dour looks on their faces. They would not invite a conversation with somebody that they didn't know anything about, considering that somebody that they know would probably inform on them. So why take a risk with somebody even more dubious? And they taught this to the children. And as loving parents, this makes sense, because you want the best for them. And the children also of these people are very dour. And that's going to take time to change, which is why it's the hangover of communism. And that's what's being imported here to the West, to Canada, and hopefully not to America. But that is what they desire. They want total acquiescence. And that's what Jordan's talking about here.
We'll walk through this again. I retweeted Pierre Poilievre. He's the leader of the opposition in Canada. And because of that, I'm being investigated by my regulatory body. My public reputation is at stake, and I may no longer be able to practice or describe myself as a clinical psychologist.
Yeah, I included that in there just to demonstrate once again, when you hold the wrong political belief, they will find any reason to go after you. And to list Pierre retweeting the opposition leader, the conservative leader, it just shows what a political hit job it is. And I'm just reiterating this so that you know that this is going to come for all of us, because Jordan Peterson, once again, is the dam that holds them back from going after other professionals. And in California right now, under a bill AB 2098, you cannot, as a doctor, issue a statement, a thought to a patient that might go against the orthodoxy of Pfizer, as they command the politicians to believe about the vaccine, or else you're committing a harm. And that's the same thing that's happening here. You dare retweet a conservative MP in Canada? Off with your head. We are going to make your life a living hell. And the same thing has come to California and is now, as of January 1st of this year, a law. That is frightening.
It's very stressful, this, and I've spent hundreds of hours just trying to organize the arguments that have been marshaled against me and understand what the hell they are. Part of the process that's punitive, and the bloody activists know this, is that as soon as you have complaints levied against you, you're basically snowed under by the obligations of what's essentially a serious lawsuit. And, you might say, well, it's not a lawsuit, it's just an investigation. It's like, well, the college itself suggests that once one of these investigations is levied, that the person being investigated acquire legal counsel. So they know bloody well right that this is essentially a quasi-criminal investigation, or at least it has that element of process about it. And the social justice warriors who are utilizing these colleges have figured that out, and they're perfectly willing to use third-party bureaucracies as cudgels to enforce their oh-so-compassionate, narcissistic worldview and to be censorious. And you see this on Twitter too. As I've made this public, there are good thinkers everywhere who are saying, I got what I deserved, even though it isn't obvious exactly why I deserved it. And I'm perfectly happy to see this happening. And, that shows you what kind of motivations a large percentage of the population has. In Eastern Germany, a third of the population were KGB informers. And so there's a very large swath of the public who would be perfectly happy to see anybody who doesn't share their political views punished harshly for their audacity. And I think that's particularly true of radical leftists in relationship to anything that's centrist or conservative. As I'm going to make this public, I've already told them essentially to go to hell, although I did it politely. And now they have to drag me in front of a disciplinary hearing, which I will make unbelievably public. And then because I won't move in that regard, as far as I can tell, I don't see that they have a leg to stand on. Not only am I being accused in the vast majority of the accusations of having unacceptable political beliefs, but half the people who complained claimed they were clients of mine. So procedurally, this is also a nightmare for them, as far as I can tell, because at minimum, they should have inquired in relationship to these claims that the complainants were clients of mine. They should have noted to them that they weren't, and they should have required them to initiate the complaint process without falsehood. And they didn't do any of that repeatedly.
It's akin to accusing Brett Kavanaugh of rape when you barely even met him. In this case, the people haven't even met Jordan Peterson. At least Christine Blasey Ford theoretically met Kavanaugh at some time. Of course, it was 30 years ago, but this is the weaponization of the legal system by the woke, who only care not about honesty, not about truth, but in gaining the upper hand because they are so morally virtuous that it excuses their horrific actions, which is why they are willing to accept complaints from somebody who never dealt with Jordan Peterson on a personal basis.
The worst thing they can do is suspend my license and make a public statement that because of my refusal to comply with their dictates, I'm no longer acceptable as a licensed clinical psychologist. And I don't want them to do that because I believe that I earned my license and am also a good advocate on the clinical front. I don't want to be in a position where faceless bureaucrats motivated by a political agenda and whatever envy and resentment they carry in their dark and nasty little hearts have the opportunity to strip me of something that I spent a decade of extremely hard work earning.
Yes, exactly. They do not have the right to take something that he has earned. But of course, in the communist mind, they absolutely do, especially with their moral superiority level. And I repeat that Jordan Peterson is the one thing that stands in their way of stripping anybody that they find disdainful of their right to a livelihood based on their political beliefs, so that they can get everybody to kowtow to them. And so everybody then believes that there is no opposition to the woke. These people are so morally arrogant that they believe that they have the only views that are acceptable. And this is what it was like in Russia, where you dared not stand up to the government, to the Kremlin.
Yeah, well, who wants to be part of this creepy little club of psychologists that are just telling people lies anyway? If the entire profession is being forced to not tell their clients the truth, then maybe you should drop that club.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that, Michaela. The bodies that govern the training programs for clinical psychologists in Canada, the Canadian Psychological Association, has increasingly moved to make it mandatory for universities that offer clinical psychology training to do that under the rubric of social justice or face the suspension of the accreditation of their programs. And that's also happening in medicine. Everyone listening, you bloody well better listen to this, people, because we're entering a situation where the universities themselves are required to ensure that your physicians and your psychologists are of a particular political stripe, which essentially means radically left, not just left, but radically left, like social justice, full woke, critical racist theory, oppressive, patriarchal narrative, feminist left wing, or the institution itself will not be allowed to train physicians or psychologists. And I know that sounds like a conspiracy theory, and well, go look it up for yourself and see if it's true, because it's true right down to the last word. And so if you Canadians, you think you're going to be served well by craven political ideologues who are primarily selected to be physicians on the basis of their political purity, you've got a bloody another thing coming. That didn't work out so well in Eastern Europe. Let me tell you, it's not going to work out very well for us either. And so part of the reason I'm willing to make this battle public is to try to alert people to the fact that we're a hell of a lot farther down this road than we think. You know, I went through Eastern Europe for 4 months this spring, talking to people there. I had the privilege of meeting, 30 or 40 people in each country who were political or cultural leaders across the political spectrum, including leftists who'd been mobbed like mad by their own compatriots. And every single one of the people I talked to, virtually without exception in Eastern Europe, said something like, do you know what happened here between the end of the Second World War in 1989 when we were dominated by the communists? Do you know how awful it was here? That was particularly true in Albania. Do you know you people in the West are walking down exactly the same road? What the hell's wrong with you? Don't you notice? And this included the socialists in those Eastern European countries, who remember the tender mercies of the radical leftists and the fact that, 1 out of 3 people in most of those countries, even if they were within your own family, were government informers. And where the joke was, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us, and where people spent hours in bread lines and fought over terrible little rat hole apartments as they were quasi-starving to death, unable to ever tell the truth or speak.
Obviously, I agree with Jordan. Otherwise, I would be spending my time making these videos and alerting what I hope is a growing number of people that sympathize with his position, that understand the damage that the woke are doing to our society, where they are trying to normalize pedophiles by calling them minor attracted people and trying to excuse their actions. It is absolutely horrific to me that somebody could potentially do that to a child. But this is what they did in the Soviet Union. When you have people that gain total control, that demand conformity, you're going to experience that. And as I mentioned, I know what it's like in Eastern Europe because I lived there. And you see the dour looks on the people's faces and the lack of opportunity that has existed because capitalism and fending for yourself was literally illegal under penalty of death. Literally, they would kill you if you tried to start a capitalist enterprise. And that is similar to what they want. They want the same type of control here. And I hope that everybody stands with the Albanians as they dictate to you. We're in a lot more trouble than you think. So even if we're not, shouldn't we at least stand up and try to fight it? And shouldn't you guys be sharing videos like this one, like others that are warning people? Because it's a lot easier just to stay comfortable and allow Jordan Peterson to fight for you rather than standing next to him and taking some measure of risk, but you'll feel a lot better if you do.
People have asked me that too. Why don't you just give up your license? And I would say, well, because I wouldn't be giving it up. I would be allowing it to be taken away from me. Like if I decide in a year that I don't want to be a licensed clinical psychologist because the whole damn profession has become corrupt, that's a whole different issue than letting this pack of craven commissar cowards organized behind the scenes utilize the complaints of random people online to justify their own envy and desire to prosecute and then fold in the face of that opposition. It's like, I'm not going to do that. Now you say, well, what do you do? And I think the only answer to that is, I think the only thing you have in a complex situation is the truth. That's all you have. That's why you have to abide by the truth, because when things get complex around you, how do I deal with this politically? How do I deal with this personally? What do I say in this terribly complex situation? All you have there that's solid ground is the truth. And one of the things to reflect upon in relationship to that is that's also why you have to live honestly, because it's very hard to tell the truth if you're simultaneously worried that the evidence of your past misbehavior, your past deceitful misbehavior is going to come to light. And so the reason you abide by the truth is so that you can say what you have to say about what you've done and who you are, and you can do that under impossibly difficult circumstances, and possibly that will sustain you through that in circumstances where if that's not possible, you're just going to get crushed.
There's a test that they do where they have you held out your arm like this, and they have you state a truthful statement, and the person opposite you will press down on your arm, and there's a lot of resistance. Then they say, tell a lie with your arm out. And you can try to tell your body, hold there, be fast, be steady, and yet your arm goes down so much more rapidly. When you tell the truth, you are operating from a place of strength internally and externally, and people feel it. And when you lie, you feel bad internally. And I'm sure that we've all done something where we are not proud of, and we lie about it, and it eats away at us inside. Maybe there are a few psychopaths that truly don't care whether or not they lie, whether or not they harm people. But the fact is that when you are rooted in the truth, your tree is more like an oak than something that blows away in the breeze. And that's what Jordan is getting at, because when that storm comes, you want to be rooted, and as rooted as possible. So guys, please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. regarding this video, regarding Jordan's statements and the accusations and charges that he faces, and lend some support to Jordan. Go out there and let your voice be heard. Write the Canadian Psychologist Board, write to Jordan. People do read this, and stand up against the wokeness lest it come for you, because it is a cancer that is eating away at our society that eventually will engulf us all in one way or another.